Today we're going to talk about balance. Balance is the equilibrium of opposing or interacting forces in a pictorial composition. So in the piece we see over here, this is a bookshelf made by Joseph Albers in 1923. So like within our bodies, when we feel off balance, like if we're about to trip or fall, or if we're on something precarious, it feels uncomfortable or overwhelming or just not satisfying. But if we feel like we're on sturdy ground and we're stable and we know where we are, we respond well to that. So like with this bookshelf, it gives us sort of this calm sense of control and ease because there's really just this kind of overall balance to the piece. It feels very safe. All right, so in our pictorial spaces, in order to create balance, we often refer to the axis line. So the axis line is a line of reference around which a form or composition is balanced. So in this piece by Ed Ruscha called Step on No Pets, this is actually a palindrome. So if you were to fold it in half, it would perfectly line up on both sides of the other, and it's even reinforcing that by having that sort of word play where you can see that those words are inversions of each other. So this axis line is kind of the whole point of this piece. Everything derives from what comes out of the middle, and it's really the whole thing that the piece is balanced around or focused on. So that line going right through the middle, that axis line. So another tool of pictorial balance is the equilibrium. So when we talk about equilibrium, we're talking about visual balance between opposing compositional elements. So equilibrium is when things kind of come together to achieve balance. There's an equal footing that things are standing on. So in this piece called UA Playhouse, New York, from 1978, we see that this is a photograph that was actually made by opening the camera and having a long exposure time. So the actual duration of the film, the camera was open, and so it looks like it's a white screen at the end because there's so much light that's come out of it, but it actually was tons of different colors and shapes. And it just kind of ends up being this really serene, calm, kind of almost like a window that you're looking through or something like that, but it's really well balanced in the theater. We see that there's kind of the way the screen is set up and those kind of scalloped shapes that are around kind of framing the screen are really symmetrical. And again, this is actually probably a palindrome. If we fold it in half, it would be perfectly equal. So there's just lots of balance. It feels very comforting. It feels really serene and safe and kind of contemplative. So the equilibrium is very nice in this piece. All right, now let's talk about imbalance. So imbalance occurs when the opposing or interacting forms are out of equilibrium in a pictorial composition. So in this piece that we see on the right by Philip Guston called Transition, there's multiple examples of how the piece is imbalanced. Now, imbalance does not necessarily mean a bad thing. So with this piece, we see that there's kind of this painting on the side, right bottom hand corner with a hand on it that also kind of looks a little bit like a guillotine to me, but that's okay. There's all these kind of cluttered shapes. There isn't really a balance to the edges. Everything's kind of on the right, and everything's on, the heaviest part of the painting's on the top. So there's just a lot of jumbled, mixed up feelings here and a lot of unease and imbalance. So in order to create serene and calm feelings, you want things to be balanced. If you want your audience to feel like, ooh, something's out of control here, if the message is about that, then imbalance will help your audience members feel like something's off, something isn't as it should be. Now, one of the biggest reasons why that Guston painting looks imbalanced or off kilter in that painting is because it's breaking this sort of horizontal rule of placement. So everything is at the top. So the heaviest part of the painting where there's the darkest colors, it seems like there's the most objects, like it literally would be the heaviest object in the painting, is at the top right hand corner. Now we're not used to that again. We want everything to be at the bottom, the heaviest things to be at the bottom. So like in the rivers behind the trees, we can see that there's the darkest colors are at the bottom. That's where the land is. Gravity falls that way. So that's where we imagine everything to be. Again, relationship to your body. Heaviest parts should be at the bottom. If things are heavy that are above you, that feels a little off. And also the vertical placement. So in this painting, The Rivers Behind the Trees, we can see that on the right side and the left side, there's kind of equal weight of objects. And in the Guston painting, everything's on the right. So it's kind of feeling a little off balance. There isn't as much stuff on the left as there is on the right. Okay, symmetrical balance. So to kind of get away from imbalance and come back to something that feels more balanced. Symmetry. Symmetry is a quality of composition or form wherein a precise correspondence of elements exists on either side of the center axis or point. So in this piece by Julia Half-Candle called Interlocking Arch, we see these two hands. Not only are the exact same shapes on both sides, horizontally and vertically, but even the colors seem to be balancing itself, almost like it's like if there's an X or something, but then there's also an O. So there's just all this symmetry. Everything seems to be equal and opposite on both sides, really balanced. Another example of symmetrical balance is bilateral symmetry. So balance with respect to the vertical axis. So in this piece by Anna Wintour, or this piece of Anna Wintour by Alex Katz is a painting of her. She's dead in the middle. And again, it is a portrait, but it also is somewhat of a palindrome. If we were to cut her face down the middle, fold it in half, and sandwich it together, it would be exactly the same on one side, almost as it is on the other side. So it really creates this sort of super balance. There's so much going on in this piece that creates it really equal. So symmetry unifies. So in the last one, we talked about this painting of Anna Wintour. So another thing that makes this piece really, it's not only really balanced, but it also happens to be really static. So she seems to be totally not moving. Maybe she's even sitting. Maybe she's someone who died, like who we are looking at from a long time ago. But basically, she just feels really static, and static is still stable or unchanging. Now, this can be a tool as well. So Anna Wintour is the editor-in-chief of Vogue in America, and she has been for a long time. You maybe have seen the film The Devil Wears Prada. It was based off her. So she's kind of a titan of what the rules of fashion are. She makes rules, she sets them. She's the standard of industry. She's this really stable person who kind of controls the way that culture moves and shifts. So to have her be really symmetrical kind of reinforces the fact that she has this power, that she's really stable and really has a lot of control over her life and the world. Okay, asymmetrical balance. So balance that is achieved with dissimilar objects that have equal visual weight or equal eye attraction. So in this piece called Supremely Black, we see that the balance is achieved mostly by color and shape. So we have these red and black shelf and then red and black forms, and they kind of are balancing each other. And the reason how they're able to do that is because there's sort of three red objects on one side and then like two little black guys, and they just seem to be kind of equaling not only the shelf, but then there's kind of a little bit more dynamicism in the red boxes, but then the shape's different. I don't know. There's all these things that kind of, they're different, but they somehow seem to equal out to kind of make the same thing. So even though they're not totally symmetrical, it's not a palindrome, it's not exactly the same on both sides, they're similar enough that they give us that feeling that they're balanced. So asymmetrical balance, still balanced, but in a different type of way, in a kind of off way. Okay, informal balance. So this is synonymous with asymmetrical balance, but it's a little different because it gives us a less rigid, more casual impression. So with the last piece, it was almost mathematical in its asymmetry. This piece is a little bit different. So this is a photograph by Nan Golden, and in it we see this young woman, and she's kind of a little bit farther on the right side, but her hand with the cigarette to the left side almost balances. It's hard to know which place my eye goes to first, her face or her hand with the cigarette. I don't even know which one I saw first, but there seems to be kind of two things that are vying for our attention, which is odd because oftentimes the face is the thing that we go to first. So there's just this kind of off balance, not only, and then her shirt is black and we can see this little tiny bit of furniture behind her that's black on the left-hand side. So it's balanced. There's kind of almost equal weight on both sides, but it's this very casual, it's hard to tell what's exactly making it. It's not mathematical. It feels pretty balanced, but it's also kind of not perfectly balanced. So very informal. Okay, another ways to make asymmetrical balance is through value. So in this piece, it's a print by Frederick Evans, and in it we see there's kind of this dark black column to the right, and then on the left there's these black and white, really kind of gray area where we see all this architecture. Now, most of the action or what the attention that we're looking to is on the left side. It's in that kind of space that we feel like we could walk into. But with that black column being the darkest space, it kind of creates this contrast. So there's this high value shift between that column on the right side and then the space on the left. And by having these kind of value shifts there, it really creates this sort of odd, slightly off, but somehow seemingly kind of balanced piece. So if that column wasn't there, it wouldn't seem like that left side was really as strong as it is. So it kind of shifts our idea of what the balance could possibly be. All right, so balance can also be made through color. So this is a really kind of dynamic way to make it asymmetrical. So we can see that their eyes are looking at each other, but then there's also these kind of weird tensions between what is the object of focus. So you kind of go to his face first, and then your eye goes to the blouse that she's wearing, and then it goes to this red kind of garment that he's wearing around his waist. So it kind of is zipping around, but in all of them, there's this shift of value and color, and it kind of bounces your eye kind of left and right on the in the painting, and kind of creates this focus going back and forth. So it's a complex type of thing, but the color is kind of bouncing our eyes right and left, making it so that there's this feeling of action going on in the middle that really balances the piece. All right, asymmetrical balance. This is an example of texture. So this is a colored wood block, which is a type of print. From 1820 to 1830. So in it we see that there's this mountain with a sky behind and then this kind of forest below. So the most kind of striking thing is that mountain at first. We see that it's the brightest color, the warmest, that orange, and then we see that there's kind of this blue behind it, which is complementary color, so those kind of really vibrate. The green feels kind of complementary to the orange too, or it's close, so the most kind of visually striking thing happens to be that mountain that's kind of centered right, but then the patterns of the sky and the forest kind of being so like distinctive kind of pull our eyes away. So I'm doing this thing where I see the mountain first, then I kind of see the sky, then I kind of see the grass. So my eyes kind of balance, like moving around in a circle a little bit, but it really gives weight to both sides of the picture. So we see that there's something really significant going on the right side with that mountain, and then really significant going on with the texture of the clouds and the forest. So texture is really kind of creating a balance as well. All right, finally, we're going to look at a really dynamic set of compositions. So sometimes things are really straight on and really forward, but oftentimes we're going to see a lot of different things going on. So this is a really interesting way to look at balance, I think. So this is a photograph by Carey Wenegard. It's of the White Sands National Monument. So in it we see a family of three getting out of the car, kind of at a picnic table, and there's two figures on the right, one on the left, but that kind of car door almost takes the place of another figure because it's such a high contrast. So that door is black and then the space behind it's white. So it really kind of creates a sharp contrast. That guy's orange shirt is also really bright, so it kind of creates a complementary color. So there's just all these little things. The more you look at this photograph, the more you start noticing, like, okay, there's one thing on this side, but then, oh, it is there too. It might be a little different, but there's just really kind of this sense of balance. And then overall, it's horizontally balanced. So even though it seems like there's a lot of things going on, it actually creates a fairly great sense of ease and comfort. And there's still action and dynamicism, but it feels like they're very much in this specific, perfect, purposeful place. So really, really dynamic form of balance. Yeah.